Welcome, welcome once again. This is the first of the training sessions that we will have for the second part of the year. I'm Francisco Piccolini. I'm the Open Source Community Manager for OpenNebula Systems. You might know me from previous events like the webinar series. Now we are a little bit more practical. So welcome everyone. I'm not gonna be the one that will be talking about the training session and OpenNebula operations. It will be my colleague, Alex Petrov. So I'm going to introduce him on stage now and welcome Alex to this new training series for OpenNebula.
Welcome everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Perfect. So yeah, hi Anton. We have people commenting on the chat. Alex will be covering OpenNebula operations. It's going to be a basic, an introduction to OpenNebula platform in general. So all the basic operations, all the basic deployment, and all that. Ask your questions on the chat. Feel free to do it. Feel free to do any comment. If you have any other comment or any question that could be a little bit exceeding the purpose of this training session, you can totally use our community forum. So no worries about that. In any case, let me check that I put, yeah, here. Here it is. Ask your question in the chat or visit forum.opennebula.io. I have prepared all those things. So without any further or more comments on my side that I can expand a lot, I'm gonna leave Alex on stage, and I will start sharing screen with you. So enjoy the training session, everyone. Bye-bye, Alex.
Thanks for introducing me. And yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, my name is Alexis, but feel free to call me Alex, as was introduced. That's fine. And we are going to talk about the introductions to OpenNebula operations. So, well, basically, let's assume that you just got your OpenNebula installation, and you just sit in front of the screen, and well, probably you don't know what to do. So that is the perfect session for that. So we're going to guide you from basically logging into the whole new world of OpenNebula, and then we will end up with deploying virtual machine. So it would be kind of fun session, I'd say. Right. So that's our agenda. We're talking about Sunstone. We're talking about settings. That's the user settings. We're going to touch the virtual networks, as well as talking about the marketplace and applications. So what's the meaning behind them? Also, virtual machine templates, why we need them, so what it is, and how to actually fine-tune them and make sure that they suit your needs. And also, as I mentioned, we are going to launch the virtual machine. So yeah, follow. And the session will be mostly in the web UI of OpenNebula. I will occasionally go back to the slide deck. I have a few slides, but no worries, it's not going to be a death by the PowerPoint. So every section I will start with a minor introduction into that. So what we're actually talking here about. So the Sunstone, what it is. So Sunstone is the graphical user interface. And like currently we have two. One is the one that we kind of deprecating, and then the new one, which is very modern, nice, shiny. So I very highly recommend you to, even though we still have the old one, dive into the new one. It is much more interesting, right? So if you're not using proxy, or if you don't do anything custom, and we can agree that you should install it with the mini1 deployment, then your Sunstone is going to listen on a port 2616. So that is the default port. Obviously, you can proxy it via whatever proxy you would like to, or even go and change it into configuration if you'd like to. But if we're talking about the vanilla deployment, then here it is. 2616. Another cool feature, it has a built-in time-based MFA, so you can, after you deploy it, feel free to jump straight in and configure that. So make sure you are secured, and if someone steals your password, you still can he still cannot log in. And it's a single point of entry for whatever user is using OpenNebula. So that means administrators, that means the cloud users, both will use the same interface. But the thing that it will slightly differ. So it's also something that we are going to explore right now. So here is the login screen, right? So we just need to go and jump and start configuring. So we're welcomed with a login screen. We have a built-in user, which is one admin, right? So it comes predefined, and that's the top level admin. So try to avoid sharing credentials with someone you don't trust, because if you have access by the one admin, you can do whatever you want, right? So you basically a super user, right? So then you log in, and after you pass the login screen, you can see the dashboard. Now on the left hand side there is the menu, and that menu consists of your overview of your instances, your virtual machine templates, storages, networks, the whole infrastructure. So if you'd like to look at your hosts or configure new hosts or manage hosts in whatever way you would like to, you will go under the hosts. Now, for easier access, we have 4 shortcuts, so you can quickly jump between and jump straight into your virtual machines, your templates, your images, or virtual network configuration. So one important thing is that as one admin, so basically as the top tier administrator, you can access literally everything. Now, your users are going to have a slightly different view, and depends on what's configured. It either would be a cloud view or user view or group admin view. So these views are much more simplified, and as I've just changed to cloud view, and as you can see on the left hand side, on the left menu, you already drill down to some specific tabs accessed, and specific things under these tabs accessible. So basically, what does it mean that you kind of taking away things that not needed for to that user? And as the one admin, obviously you can access whatever you wish, and of course we are going to proceed with one admin. Now, every user is going to have settings. So settings are quite important, not only because this is how a user will be able to add its own SSH key, but they're also how to enroll your MFA. Also, you can introduce custom labeling and label your resources with, for example, dev or prod or whatever label you want. So every user has these settings under the settings tab. Now, here's the enrollment of the MFA, and this is important, the public key, SSH public key, because if we're talking about the resources and how you will be able to access them, well, you need to somehow access them, right? And you most likely would like to access them either via the VNC or using the SSH, whichever way you would like to. But obviously, if you need to go deep into the configuration, one of the most preferred would be secure shell connection. So by default, when you create a virtual machine, it's going to take your public key and will register that as the authorized key, which is quite important because if you don't have this one, then you'll not be able to access, for example, from your machine or from your jump host or from any other. So this is where you need to enroll that key. So just copy paste the public key, and that's it. You're all set. Additionally, you can create your own labels and then further label some resources with dev or prod labels again, or any other labels. So they're not that much of a limit, but of course, over labeling is also not the greatest idea. Now, you can also set your default endpoint if you're having more than one, and also select the view that you would like to be your default view. Now, that is quite important. Probably you configure it once, you register your MFA authentication, and basically that's it. So you're no longer need to go into this page, unless you also, unless you also would like to change the schema. So you would like to go from dark to light, or use your system. So dark is also looking cool, but I prefer to go with light for the demonstrations because then it makes screen sharing a little bit better. But I know that in our IT world, there are a lot of administrators and a lot of users that prefer everything strictly into the dark mode. So we've got you covered here. Right. So you have your OpenNebula installed and you have your host up and running. So what's next? Well, you need to make sure that your virtual machines that you're going to deploy later, they have some kind of a network communication, right? And with OpenNebula, we support multiple standards. We support the bridged network. We support Open vSwitch, and we support VXLAN, and we also support .1Q. So these industry standards are supported, as well as virtual network allows you not only to use networks, but also create some specific network reservations. So you basically can take a chunk of addresses and then use that instead of the whole pool. And also you can benefit from network templates. So these can be configured under the networks, virtual networks. So first of all, that's where the list of your virtual networks will be, right? There is a nice thing if we look at Mini1. So Mini1 has bridged network by default, and we have two types of bridged networks. One bridge network is a simple one. Second, with security groups. And security groups, well, acts basically as the firewall. So you may not rely on the operating system firewall, but rely on the virtual interface to filter out traffic that you don't want to go inside your virtual machine or outside of your virtual machine. Also, by looking at the virtual network, you can find the current IP address ranges that are configured, right? You can also see the ones that are currently leased. At the moment, I'm not running any virtual machine, so this is a pretty much fresh deployment. That's why there is no any IP address reserved for any virtual instance. But I can reserve that if I would like to. Or if I don't want some specific IP addresses to be issued to my virtual machines. So for example, I don't want 172.16.103 to be issued to any virtual machine. So I can hold it and then it will appear as the held IP address. So this one's no longer in the pool. And if we go a little bit down here, so we can see that there is one IP address currently reserved. So yeah, please, if you're following along, then go ahead and reserve one IP address. Now, some other information can be viewed here, like who is the owner and the group ownership of that resource, as well as who can use that resource. And ownership is very important because whichever resource you create as the user, you will be the owner of that resource, and you'll be the only one who can use that resource out of the box. Obviously, you can go and configure and make sure that the others will be able to access this resource once you've created. So, but that's not the current topic of today, right? So, but by default, when you create any resource, then you are the only user and you are the only owner of that. So you can share this resource with your user group, which in my case is one admin, or you also can share this resource with others. So which means that any other user in OpenNebula will be able to use that virtual network to deploy virtual machines. And this is quite a nice thing that you can benefit of if you would like to share your resource with any other group of users. But by default, please remember you're the only one who has ability to use that resource. And it's even more important when we'll start talking about images, because with images, there's a one small trick that I'll be discussing a little bit later. But yeah, so permissions are of course very important. And again, make sure you share your resources with the right people. Now, virtual network also can be reserved. For example, we can create a reservation and name it as, for example, demo reservation, and say that we would like to reserve 10 IP addresses from that pool. And we also can define what will be the first IP address. So for example, it will be 172.16.112. So then 10 IP addresses starting from this IP address are going to get reserved. And this reservation will be created as the separate interface. And what's quite important, it will inherit all the settings like the network driver from its parent. So as soon as I hit accept, it's going to appear right here. So what exactly happened? As you can see, our original virtual network now again reduced by 10 addresses. So now totally we have 11 IP addresses reserved from that network. So, and if we go to the lease settings of that network, then you can find that net1, which basically the ID of this reservation, as you can see right here, there is the ID number. So the ID reserved these 10 IP addresses, plus the one that we currently placed on hold. So again, that is quite important because, for example, you may want to share this pool of addresses, but you don't want some users to have access to the whole pool, but you still would like them to be in the same subnet, for example. So then you can create this reservation and you can share this reservation instead of sharing the original virtual network. So you can play around with this as well, and then can make sure that it suits your needs. Right. So again, as I mentioned, we have plenty of drivers supported. So out of the box, that is the list. So when you configure your network interface, you may set the one that's necessary, and also you can attach it to a physical device, or you may set it to use only for the private host networking. So basically, it's not going to be attached to any device. Now, if you ask yourself, where are the security groups? So there is a specific place where you configure security groups, and you always have the default security group, which basically allows anything in, anything out. If you'd like to create your own, then feel free to do that. So you'll need to, somewhere there, you need to give it a name and then define a bunch of rules. So we're not going to configure any security groups as of right now. So that's why you don't need to follow this. I just want you to know where you can find it, and so where it's located. Again, please note that as soon as we switch to Cloud Admin, that's it. By default, Cloud User has nothing to do with networking. So Cloud User just uses whatever was allowed, and typically didn't go much deep into the network. So as the admin, bam, again, I can use and configure whatever I want. Now, Marketplace is something that we, going from the virtual networks, we're going to the storage, but explicitly to the marketplace. Now, if virtual network is, you define how your systems can connect with each other or with a public network, then marketplace is the source of your virtual images. So it has the pre-built images. We have public marketplaces. You can also host your own private marketplaces using the HTTP or S3 bucket technology. So if you would like to, then feel free to also have your own private marketplaces only that serving your internal needs. But just in case, there are public marketplace with maintained images. And the cool thing about these images is that they're ready to use. So even if you would like to build your own image, you can get one from the public marketplace and then adjust it so you don't need to start from scratch. Or if you're okay with just going with whatever is a predefined, then feel free. Yeah, so these images are ready to use and configured according our standards, and yeah, so they're fully functional. So feel free to grab your image from the public marketplace. But you may say, like, hey Alex, wait a second, you're talking about images, but this topic is marketplace and apps. Why it's like that? Well, you see, marketplace is a little bit more than just plain images. In marketplace, we have, of course, images, but also virtual machine templates or service templates. And service would be a multi-VM deployment. So something that has multiple virtual machines and some interconnection between these machines, and also scalability settings. So, and these templates are also can be found under the marketplace. So that's why it's not just marketplace and images. That's why it's marketplace and apps. So your marketplaces can be found under the storage marketplace. So the Linux containers by default is disabled, and we have the OpenNebula public that contains 75 images, and these 75 images are there, and it is enabled by default. And if you are using Mini One for this training, then by default, you already got one image from that, and that would be the Alpine Linux, right? So that is what comes with the Mini One deployment. It downloads the Alpine Linux image for you, as well as pre-creates some virtual networks for you, so you can fully test drive the OpenNebula and start from basically already pretty much configured system. Now, marketplaces, again, as I mentioned, you can add your own, but for the purpose of this training, we're going with the public marketplace that has all the images we need. Now, if you click on apps, then you'll find a lot of things. And right now, if you look at the screen, you can see that some of them are images, right? Some of them are virtual machine templates. So what is the difference? Right. So virtual machine template is much bigger than an image. Virtual machine template can have multiple images. So one could be an image of operating system. One can be an image with, let's say, some certain tools that you would like to, or some read-only data. So that's why virtual machines, virtual machine templates are a little bit bigger than the images, but one cannot live without another. So yeah. Now you can use search to find images that you would like to. So for example, you can search for Alma Linux, or search for the CentOS, or search for Ubuntu. So that's what we are going to grab from the marketplace today for the purpose of this training, right? So we have multiple versions of Ubuntu that you may download. So there's a minimal version, then there is a full version of the Ubuntu. Basically, take the one you wish, but we'll go with the simple Ubuntu 24.04 image, and we will download it. Now, the thing is that once you click download, so basically store it to the OpenNebula, you also have by default a radio button enabled. Export associated virtual machine templates or images, because as I mentioned, you may go with downloading a service. Service would be a multi-VM application that consists of different tools and different virtual machines. It might be service that has Alma Linux and let's say Alpine Linux or something else. So that's why by downloading the service, you're actually going to download the images, and you're also going to download the virtual machine templates. Same goes with this Ubuntu image, right? So we are downloading the image, but also we're going to import the virtual machine template. Again, totally up to you. You may say like, I don't need it. I can just, grab an image and off we go. It's also totally fine, but I would still recommend you to get the template. You see, if you even don't want to use it, you may take a look on this template, see how it's configured, because again, templates are ready to use. You just, go and next, finish, and you have the perfectly running virtual machine. So you may use this virtual machine template as the basis for your own custom templates. So keep it as is, just copy it, and based on that, adjust it to serve your needs. So that's why, I would say you would like to go with grabbing the associated virtual machine templates if it has one. Now then, you must select data store. So data store is not a part of this training, because if we go into the data stores, then we'll start to discuss a lot of stuff. And I mean, probably half a day is not enough. But still, so OpenNebula has a support for multiple different data stores. They might be local to this hypervisor, or these data stores might be shared network attached data stores. So all that is available to you. So feel free to configure the one that's required. So, but by default, we have three data store types. We have images, we have system, and we have files. So your images supposed to, guess where? Of course, your images supposed to be stored on the image data store. If you have more than one, then you can pick the data store you wish, the one that obviously is accessible to this cluster. But if you have only one, and again, for purpose of this training, we're using MIDI one, so you have only one image data store, then we going with the defaults. And yeah, so now a little bit of a backend thing happens. So you're supposed to also click and get this virtual machine template. So your image goes into the ready state. Right now, it's still downloading. If you are a little bit of a quick hand, and that's fine, because, again, we're in IT, we like to click things pretty much fast. You may go to virtual machine templates, and you may find that the template is already there. But hold on your horses. It's not that fast, right? So the downloading of the template, which basically is a bunch of text and variables, is lightning fast. If we go to images, well, images is a little bit more, right? So it's 4 gigs rather than just a bunch of text. So it takes a little bit more to grab that one. Obviously, it all depends what the network type you're using, how fast it is, but still typically 1, maybe 2 minutes, and it is there. So before going and running your virtual machine template from very first second, check the images first. It must be there, otherwise it's just not ready yet. And we have a question about the hierarchy. Is template and then goes to image. I wouldn't say like that, because the virtual machine templates and images are separate entities, right? And they can basically exist without each other. It's just template will incorporate that image. And we're going to touch it when once I'm going into the adjusting virtual machine templates. But yeah, it's I'd say there are two separate entities linked to each other, but again, not always. Right. So images right there. Basic operations with images. Obviously, you can clone an image. You don't need to proceed with that. Just want to show you how easily it's done. All right. So, and it just quickly clones an image, and that's basically it. Then you can delete images and so on and so forth, and create your own images if you'd like to. But as we already discussed, image is not a template, right? Image is just a disk image, so some kind of disk. It might be the operating system, but it also might be, I know, a CD-ROM, or it might be some set of read-only tools, or maybe even some scripts that you can just grab from that image and paste it directly onto machine and run the scripts. So it might be basically whatever you want, right? So that's why we are typically operating with virtual machine templates, right? So virtual machine templates is a set of images, set of network interfaces, and adjustable parameters for the upcoming machine, right? So you define different settings like memory, like virtual CPU, like networking, amount of network cards, and so on in the virtual machine template. So when you bring this up, it has already configured. Now, the thing is, since we're operating as one admin, as basically the top tier administrator, we can adjust whatever we want and then override majority of these features of the settings when we instantiate a template or basically running a virtual machine. Now, for your users, it's not that simple. Your users will have a slightly different set of things they can configure once they try to instantiate a VM. So always think that, for example, you can configure init script. So what your virtual machine does during the boot, installs Apache or Nginx, downloads some software, maybe imports something or configures the database. Now that is configured by you, by the image builder, but by the virtual machine template builder, but it's not accessible for the cloud user. So cloud user just instantiates or runs VM and cannot even see from the settings what is configured there. So always keep that in mind, that you as one admin, you can do whatever you want, but your users may have something different. Now, also the multi-VM deployments that I've mentioned recently, also known as services, they're going to rely on the virtual machine templates. So when you configure a multi-VM service with, let's say, database, like a couple of databases, a couple of load balancers, some other application, and so on and so forth, so they will rely on these virtual machine templates. So that's why virtual machine template is quite crucial part of the overall infrastructure. Now, so, yep, we're here and we can adjust, we can update, or you can clone things with this. So if you go to clone, you can just clone the template, right? Or you may create a clone of a template plus a clone of an image. So basically, you may have different virtual machines, different virtual machine templates that are using the same operating system, right? It just started with a different size. Let's say instead of 4 gigs of RAM, they go with 8 gigs of RAM and different set of applications installed automatically. But what else you can do, you can create a separate clone of the template and of an image. So that is also possible. So if you need, go that route. Now let's update the Alpine Linux because I'm not running the most powerful setup at the moment. As you may see in the browser, I'm actually running it in AWS. So Ubuntu may take a little bit more time to deploy and give me the controls to that VM. That's why I'm going with Alpine Linux, but essentially you should go with Alpine Linux as well, as it's tiny and fast, but after that you can play around with anything else. Now we go to the update, and then these are the hypervisors that we can pick, that we can choose from. So it might be dummy for troubleshooting or testing. It might be KVM, QEMU, or LXC, so Linux containers. So as you may know, there are other things, but they are in the MIDI one disabled, so we're not going to tackle that. Now, some basic stuff like logo, you can pick a different logo. So it's mostly for graphical thing. It's fine. So you may change the logo maybe to differentiate the pre-built or downloaded virtual machine templates from the marketplace with your own custom templates that, let's say, maybe ready to use or adjusted already. Now the memory, then you can, the physical CPUs or virtual CPUs, If you are willing to also calculate the cost of running and then provide some sort of a billing to your users, then you can set the price of running this resource, right? So let's say 128 in this scenario is fine, but you can bump it to 256 if you'd like to. Please note that memory by default is adjustable by the user. So you may set it 128 on the virtual machine template, but then your user goes and set it to 1 gig. So it is possible to limit that. It's a completely different topic, but just for your information that by default, yes, user will be able to adjust that. Now I'm going to select KVM as that's what I am currently running with the Mini One, and same will be with your case if you're following along and using Mini One. Now the juice comes under the advanced options. So once you jump into the advanced options, that's where you can attach other images. So as I mentioned, image is the operating system, but also image is something else. So it's not necessarily a bootable OS. It might be whatever you want. So you may attach more disks, as well as you can attach the volatile disk and use it, for example, as the swap. So again, totally fine. Network, that's where you attach your network cards. And again, you can have more network cards if you'd like to, or you can just change to something else. If you need, you may also create an alias to your network card. And let's say if you'd like to get a second IP address. So totally fine. Feel free to do that. So, but again, networks as the example will be also something that your user will be able to modify if needed. Now, my favorite part is like what I very, very, very like would be the context. So let's go to context and let's look what's here, and also let's change some stuff. So first thing first, as you can see, the secure shell public key, that's where your public key goes. Now, for now, by default, what it takes the user who instantiated or who deployed that machine. So that user's SSH key from the settings will be added, and then the user will be able to connect via the secure shell. Well, if you'd like to, you can paste some specific one. So again, it very depends on what you would like. For example, you have some sort of orchestrator tool that will make some post-deployment configuration, and it runs using a specific secure shell key, then feel free to paste it right here. And also start script. That's where you can type your custom commands that you'd like to be executed on boot. So, for example, please type apk add Apache 2, then hit enter and do httpd. So this is how we're going to install the Apache 2, so the basic web server, and then we're going to run this web server so we can have a connection to that, just to verify that it is there. Additional things that you may like: user input. So if you're running some complex virtual machine, or maybe set of virtual machines, and they must be post-configured with some settings. For example, I don't know, a blog, right? WordPress or database. So you may, and you would like to configure that using the user input. Then you may say like, okay, let's set the DB name, for example, as a text, right? And set the DB password. Please, you don't need to to follow user input path. I just want to show you. I'm going to delete that after that. And then also you can set these two. So then when user will try to run this virtual machine, or as we call it in OpenNebula, instantiate a template, then the user will be asked to provide the following inputs. So again, and you may leave them as optional, or you can make them mandatory, and then user will be forced to provide some kind of value there. Otherwise, no template will be instantiated. So there are a lot of use cases where it's very useful. So feel free to configure that. And what you really would love to is the context custom variables. Now, for the full list, I will encourage you to check out our documentation because it's quite a big list. But that is, you may inject some specific variables into the boot. And because our virtual machines, our images are built using a specific OpenNebula contextualization package, OpenNebula knows some specific variables that will configure something. For example, the one that's configured right here, I'm going to delete that. For example, password. So when you have the custom context variable password set to something, and that would be OpenNebula in my case. So feel free to do the same thing, or I mean, you can set it whatever you want there, but for sake of simplicity, I'm just going with OpenNebula. Now, as soon as this context custom variable is configured, it's a trigger for a contextualization package to configure this as the root password. So that is very, very, very useful. Now, there are a bunch of other things that you can do. For example, like the host name, or for example, like the time zone, right? So you can do that. And let's configure, for example, time zone. So set the time zone for our server straight away. Now we input. So let's start with the host name. I want the host name first. So set host name, and that would be web server. Because otherwise, it's going to be just localhost. But if you'd like it to set to a specific thing, then you can do like this. So set the web server. Now, it's not enough. I'm also want to set the time zone, and that's going to be time zone. And in the time zone, it would be Europe, Riga, because that's where I'm located. So I'm located in Riga, Latvia. So I would like the time zone also to be set to something that is more or less common to my location. But again, you may set whatever you want there, just it kind of supposed to make sense, right? So that would be the contextualization. You may also pass some files and so on and so forth. So you must upload files first, but that would be a little bit different story. For now, you just need to set three custom context variables. That would be password, the host name, and time zone. If you follow along, then these three, or maybe the ones you wish, for example, change the time zone or change the password. Now, you may say like, hey, Alex, clear text, OpenNebula password. Yeah, right. But as you've seen before, it's going to be hashed, so you're not going to see it as clear text anymore. And that's it. So you adjusted your template. You may also go in details about the backup, about the scheduling, about the input and output, set the key map. So if you're not using QS key map as I do, then you may want to set a different key map to your VNC, set a password for the VNC, add more PCI devices, configure the boot order, and so on and so forth. So all that can be done by the administrator when you build the virtual machine template. Now, template is there. So what's next? Obviously, next would be instantiate a virtual machine or deploy a virtual machine. Now, there are a few ways how you can do that. And you can either do it from the template view by just clicking that play button, or you may go to your instances, virtual machines, and press plus. So whichever method you prefer, totally up to you, because in the end of the day, you're going to get to the same result. Just path a little bit differs, right? So I'm going with the VMs under the instances, but you may also do it from the VM templates. Again, totally up to you. So I'm going to Alpine Linux, and here it is. So the cool thing is that I can change the memory, right? I can change the ownership. So if I have different users, I can instantiate a bunch of these virtual machines under that user. So it's also very helpful if, let's say, a user asks to do something for him, and then you just go along and then instantiate a virtual machine using that user permissions. Or otherwise, it will take the one admin, and in my case, and will create it under my user and under my primary group. So we have such thing called as primary and secondary group. So your resources will always belong to your user and your primary group. That again is quite important when you create these resources. Now, what you also can do, you can deploy multiple virtual machines. So you in a single shot, you can go with deploying 10, 15, 20 virtual machines. Just make sure that you have enough resources, right? Otherwise, well, if you're going without the resources, then half of these virtual machines are not going to get there. So they will stay in the warning state and will be deployed only when the conditions are met, which basically when you actually going to free up some spot. And that is quite important. So please make sure you have enough of the resources. Now you also can go to the advanced options and then configure different networking or attach more disks if you need, or maybe select a different operating system for booting, or basically different image. So all that is available when you deploy virtual machines. But as you can see, now it's a little bit different, right? So when we were configuring virtual machine template, we had much more settings because, well, that's logically, but it's just, again, something that I would like to point out explicitly, that it's not everything available for a change when you deploy a virtual machine. And contextualization is something that I've mentioned before, is also not there. So if you'd like to change that, you need to go to virtual machine templates and change it at the template level. And then that's it. We're clicking finish. And here we go. We have 2 virtual machines now currently in the deployment stage. So what happens underneath, there's a specific process scheduler that will look for the hypervisors that are capable running this virtual machine, that basically matches the criteria and has enough of resources, and then we'll deploy it to that virtual machine. And please take a note of the IP addresses, right? So we have one virtual machine with 0.2 IP address, and second one logically supposed to be .3, but it's not .3. Why? Because we're holding that that template, sorry, that IP address. So IP address is not available for usage. That's why the next was after the .3 is .4, and that's what was assigned. Now you can just go straight into the VNC session and see how your virtual machine boots up if it's in the booting stage, right? Or access the command line if it's already up and running. So the time it takes really depends on your resources and what you're running. So if it's a powerful host, then obviously your virtual machine will be light speed. If you are running something like myself, I'm running the AWS, so it may take a little bit more time before we're getting to the actual command line. Alternatively, you can use secure shell. So you can use secure shell to connect to your virtual machine. And since you are running as the one admin, there is a one hint. So you can do one admin and then one VM, SSH, and then pick the ID. So either it's 0 or 1 or anything else. You also can list your VMs in the command line if you'd like to, but you also can establish the secure shell to either of these machines. But that's because we are using the this one admin, so the administrator of the administrator as the owner of that machine, and by default, if you're going with a mini one deployment, you will have the same SSH key for one admin, the Sunstone, so the graphical user interface user, and the system, the Linux system user. So that's why you can pull off this trick if you're running with mini one. Now, for example, let's go to this one. And here we go. The web server is there, right? So the web server is there. Then if we go and run date, so that is pretty much the Latvian local time. So the time zone was configured correctly. Well, same, let's check a password. Was the password set correctly? So let's go to the VNC session and use root OpenNebula. And here we go. We are in. So password was set using the custom context variable that you can use. As I said, there are much more than just password and the host name and the time zone. So feel free to explore that using our awesome documentation. There's like a huge list that you can go through and pretty nice, pretty decent explanation what it does. Right. So the last but not least, let me check if we actually have the Apache running, right? So from my OpenNebula, let's curl the 172.16.102. No, it's not there. Curious why. maybe it's not running. That also possible if I mistyped the commands. Right. So yep. So HTTPD is not running, and probably I mistype the installation command. Well, that also happens, or maybe I added the wrong package. So again, well, it's not foolproof. So if I tricked myself out that way, then I should face the consequences. That means I need to go back to the virtual machine template and do that again. But ideally, we're supposed to get the it works. It works if Apache HTTPD would be running. Now, since I have the access to the command line, I can post configure it afterwards. But yeah, in this case, unfortunately, I wasn't able to install that. But it's not a big deal. The virtual machine is running, so I can do it manually if I need to, and then learn from my mistakes. And next time I'm creating a virtual machine template to put the correct command into the shell. Right. Another thing that I would like to show, since we started a little bit later, then I can show this last command. So I just want you to know it, that with one VM, if you are doing the command line thing and you would like to know the IP address, you can always use the one VM command line, show, let's say 1, and print out in a human readable format all the configurations of your virtual machines. Quite helpful to locate IP address if you don't want to go back to your interface Sunstone and check it there. And that would be it for some basic operations on OpenNebula. Of course, there's much more to dive into. The OpenNebula provides a lot more functionality than just what we did here, not limited to that basic. But again, it's a matter of 3 days course rather than 1 hour to cover all that. But if you'd like to, feel free to join the session that we're hosting in December and go through much more than this and dive deeply more into the OpenNebula operations, administration, command line, and so on and so forth. So, do we have any questions that are not yet answered by my colleague?
No, it looks like we have everything covered. Thank you, Alex, for the training, for the session. Really interesting. For everyone, we will be having this session hosted on YouTube, like I commented to AJ. I will give a couple of seconds in case that someone wants to make any comment. If not, like I say before, you can go to the forum.opennebula.io to check and evacuate any question you might have. And the thing is that just a couple of comments or advertising, for saying away. Next week on the 15th, we will have a webinar. It will be review or introduction to the new OpenNebula 6.10. On the 22nd, we will have another webinar about cloud service providers. And hopefully next month, 30 days around that time, we will have a new training session we will be announcing, but it's also about basic operations and how to use OpenNebula and all that operations foreseen away. So I think that we are good. We passed the hour, so we can end this session. And in any case, Alex will be around in the forum or on social media. I don't know. But yeah, thanks again, Alex, for the session.
Thanks for having me here. And yeah, have a great time enjoying
Yeah, thanks.
OpenNebula.
Thanks everyone for watching, and hope to see you soon in the next training session or the next webinar. So I'm gonna end the stream now, and you can rewatch on the same YouTube link in case that you need it. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.